All right. Welcome, beautiful humans, to Erotic Lessons, the podcast where we are decolonizing our relationship to desirability and self-worth using the erotic as a healing practice. I am your host, Miss Queen, clinical somatic sex therapist and embodied wellness coach, and the author of Healing the Erotic Self, in addition to the host of this podcast. You can find out more about my work at erospirituality.com. And this episode is sponsored by Healing the Erotic Self and Sex Down South Virtual Experiences, Spiritual Awakening. And so if you want to learn more about Spiritual Awakening, I invite you to join me for the upcoming 7-day erotic energy practice that starts on August 28th, in addition to 2 workshops that is going to help you decolonize your relationship to spirituality and the erotic, erospirituality, and also erotic liberation. Both of those being hosted by myself through my nonprofit, the Erospirituality Center, where I help us build emotional and mental capacity with embodied safety and self-trust. So that way we show up saving ourselves and also our relationships. And so welcome. So with erotic lessons, I look at uses of the erotic as healing intentions as described by Audre Lorde. And we're going to review usually 2, one pop culture and another politics, that also give us erotic lessons. Again, the erotic being the energy of desirability, both sexually and non-sexually. And I think that is important because we need to relearn our relationship to the erotic and allow us space for embodied liberation that helps us dissolve shame, guilt, remorse, and any of our post-traumatic symptoms that actually show up that keep us in a place where we cannot give and receive the love we desire. I am going to start with actually somatic practice. And so one of the things that we're actually going to do right now that I hope you can do with me is actually just honestly just take a moment for ourselves. So I want you to relax your face, relax your jaw, I want you to relax your shoulder. And I just want you to sit here with me and breathe naturally. If you are watching this through YouTube, thank you for joining me. If you're following this through podcast, through one of the streamings, remember, be safe, especially if you're driving, and you can do this practice afterwards. But what I really want you to do is just be present with me in the moment. Relax your face, relax your jaw, and just allow yourself a moment just to kind of sink into where you are. Let the body let go of any tension. If you feel called to move your neck from side to side, maybe in circles. Reverse the circles. Rotate your shoulders back and forth. And just shake. Shake your arms, your hands. You can wiggle your fingers and your toes. Just allow yourself just a moment to not carry all your stress and worry. The erotic reminds us that our ability to learn to live pleasurably and whole is our birthright. When we move into this place of being instead of doing. So no forcing your breath, no counted breath, just breathe naturally. Breathe from your belly and not from your chest. When you breathe from your belly, you activate your vagus nerve, which is a very large nerve that is connected to every part of ourself, every part of our body. Our self is mind, body, spirit, and energy. Just relax into the moment. And as you continue to stay relaxed, I want you to remember this practice as you move through your day and you check in with yourself. Your self-check is not where are you holding tension in your body, but are you giving yourself permission to release the tension in your body? Good. Easy start. And if that is not an easy start for you, I'm just going to again invite you to go back to that practice of relaxing your jaw, relaxing your shoulders, allowing yourself to sink or relax into the space that you're in. Breathe from your belly and not from your chest. And just give yourself a sacred pause, a moment. And so now that we've completed that practice, let's move into our conversation about erotic lessons. At the wonderful age of 51 years old, what I realize is that there are lessons we have throughout our life. Our relationship to those lessons is something that we learn throughout our life. And yes, hindsight is 2020 to some of those lessons because we have more information now than when we did when we were going through the lessons that we were learning. And so whether it's in our youth, whether we remember or not remember, right? Whether it is in our teen years, our young adulthood, our maturing adulthood, we are all learning lessons about our inherent worth and desirability. And through healing the erotic self, it invites you into stepping to an act of courage through self-compassion, self-permission to say that you are worthy to simply exist pleasurably and whole. Now, that does not mean that we don't have responsibilities to that right. And I always tell you, folks, there are right and responsibilities. And when I think about what we have a right to, we also have a responsibility to those rights. And those responsibility that when I think break down responsibility like I do for a client, it is about ownership and accountability. In my upcoming book, Shift, a self-liberation practice, I talk about how we can be in a compassionate relationship to accountability and ownership, which is what responsibility is, accountability and ownership. So that way we are moving from a place of integrity and discernment. And so integrity is about showing up, being who we are, saying who we are, communicating that, and then without causing harm to other people and being responsible to the harm that we cause, in addition to being able to develop the character for that integrity. And so what is going on in pop culture when it comes to desirability? I know there's things going on with Shamira and Cardi B, which actually I'm going to talk about on Sunday, because fat phobia and desirability politics go hand in hand. When we live in a Western society that has always qualified thinness as attractiveness and healthiness, and we know that is not always the case, the conversation that's actually going on about Cardi B, and I believe she has some fat phobic merch that went out, or she doubled down on some fat phobia. We're going to talk about more in depth. I'm going to go ahead, and it actually just came up on my timeline like yesterday, and so I've been out of the loop pop culture wise, but table that because I know that's a current conversation that's actually going on. If you listen to my conversation last week, you heard me talk about the Olay and Friends with Laverne Cox, and with a particular focus on Deshaun Harrison experience, and the author of Belly of the Beast, who talks about desirability, who whose framework is about desirability and how desirability shows up, centering fat Black bodies. And so being able to talk about fat phobia and desirability, I want to be able to be intentional about that conversation. And so we will be tabling that conversation until Sunday. What we're going to talk about today is desirability in politics and how the current US government has seized control over DC, and targeting, using the current president has activated the National Guard under the pretense of cleaning up the streets, when DC has shown, I believe, a 23% decrease in violent crimes. And literally how the US Supreme Court said a few weeks ago how cities have the rights to now criminalize homelessness in public spaces. And so when we think about who is desirable and the relationship to housing, the relationship to care and protection from said government, desirability is at play, where you see the homelessness being abhorribly treated by federal agencies, and how now with the criminalization of homelessness by the most recent executive order, that people in public spaces that are experiencing homeless are now criminalized and can be institutionalized without their consent. And so whether that is prison or inpatient hospitalization, because we also see this movement towards privatizing healthcare. And as a healthcare professional, it is definitely something to be able to speak about into the room about our relationship to how we show up as agents of a system that is causing harm to folks. And also how people have a visual understanding of homelessness, and it is by design that you have that. It is also going to be by design about the videos and the pictures and the people you see who are homeless, and how that is still a misrepresentation of people who are homeless and unhoused. A housed person can be a person who is still working a full-time job, who is not suffering from or struggling with addiction or severe mental illness. And even if an individual is, that does not mean that they deserve to have their dignity taken away from them. If you look at the World Health Organization's definition of health, it really is about our right to quality of life and access to quality healthcare as well. And so there should not be a weaponization of severe mental illness, homelessness, or disheveledness, right? Desirability shows up everywhere and is reinforced by the government's perception of desirability. And so for us, it is going to be really mindful about how we are participating in conversations in every day. You don't know if your coworker is dealing with housing issues and situations. We cannot disconnect the conversation between what is actually going on at a federal level, how that impacts our economy, how that impacts jobs, and the revision of employment protections, massive layoffs that are actually having, and how that is causing a massive disruption on our families, on our mental health, and things of that nature. And so Erotic Lessons is about a gentle reminder for us that as we are navigating our everyday lives, what we are seeing is not too far of a degree of separation of what we could be experiencing. And as a person who has experienced being unhoused and housed recently, I can tell y'all, it is never how it looks. It is never how it looks. And desirability politics informs all of that. In my book, Healing the Erotic Self, I actually talk about the sexual and social defaults that inform desirability politics. And we have to understand that employment usually informs, right, a person's ability to be housed, but where we have seen that it takes more than two incomes, full-time incomes, way above minimum age incomes, it is absolutely important to be mindful of our compassion when we are seeing others struggle and how stories are being shared about that struggle and who they're being shared by. It matters. Why does it matter? Because if your desirability politics is different from your partner's desirability politics, does that make you feel sexy? Does that make you feel connected to your partner? A lot of us, and I've had I've had clients before who are mother of trans kids and who have had partners who are not supportive of trans rights. And that's a hard dilemma for some folks to be in. And so being able to recognize that desirability politics shows up in our bedroom, this is a small example of how it could actually show up in our bedroom. And so what do you do if you and your partner are dealing with two different types of worldviews when it comes to desires and desirability, and your emotional availability to be available for intimacy and connection and desirability? One, is it safe for you to have an external conversation with them? An external conversation with them, right? Because everything is about safety. If not, is it safe for you to have a conversation with yourself about that? If you are looking for supports to help you navigate feeling safe, then I'm going to recommend my somatic healing practice Shift, that is available as a wellness care plan on my store, erospiritualitycenter.com, or or I believe I'll have it in the description actually below. And so Erotic Lessons is about what is teaching us how we're showing up every day, making decisions from a place that hopefully feels somatically safe and is hopefully informed by our desires. In our desires, let's talk about the difference between a desire and a want. A desire is a need that is required for you to thrive. And so it's not a want. It's a need. It is something that is required for you to be your most sacred self, your most sexiest self, your most confident self, your most knowing self. That is what desires are. A desire isn't something in which you can go without. It is something that allows you to thrive and not stay in the rabbit hole of escapism or escapism. I'll leave it like that. What I would love to do is to invite you to ask me questions that I can answer that on this podcast that I have twice a week on Wednesdays and Sundays at 12:30 about your relationship to desirability, your relationship to self-worth, your relationship to trusting yourself, particularly if you have, wherever you are, right? Knowing that my work does center queer, Black, and trans folks, Black, queer, and trans folks. Please know that. But my work supports anyone who is willing to do the work. Next week, I'm actually going to be starting the 7-day erotic affirmation practice for members in the Eros Spirituality Center. And so in the Eros Spirituality Center, I also offer somatic and sexuality and somatic peer support groups for healthcare providers and healing providers who want to know more about how to integrate sexuality and integrative mind, body, spirit approaches. And then also too, for survivors who are just really looking for a sacred space to honor their sexuality and spirituality with other supports. Not only do I offer my challenges, but I also offer 2 monthly groups, one erosomatic group, what I call the Erotic Self Masterclass, the other EQ, Erotic Intelligence Masterclass, and also the Shift Somatic Healing Practice, where we'll dive deeper more into the neuroscience and the care practices that help us regulate. And so as we move from crisis surviving and thriving, what resources that I offer for you are the resources to help you create embodied safety and self-trust. And so takeaways today would be, remember that politics is informed by desirability politics. Be mindful that even in your immediate area, you may be navigating or interacting with someone who's dealing with those desirability politics in ways that may not give them capacity, mental and emotional space for intimacy, for therapeutic rapport and care. And so my work focuses on supporting survivors and healing and healthcare professionals who are looking to expand their capacity, their mental and emotional space, so that way they can reclaim their lovership. So thank you for joining me today, and join me Sunday, 12:30 live on YouTube, or again on the podcast streaming systems. And I invite you again to ask me questions. You can email me at support@lenaqueen.com, and I'll be happy to answer your desirability questions on this podcast. Again, I am Miss Queen. Thank you very much for joining me. It has been my most extreme pleasure to show up in this space today. So until next